The air on Corinthia 7 was heavy with the acrid scent of scorched metal and ozone. Once a bustling colony hub, the planet now lay scarred from civil unrest and internecine warfare. Among the debris, one figure moved cautiously, her steps light yet measured, avoiding the jagged remnants of shattered buildings. Her name was Aurelia, a Tyran emissary of considerable intelligence and beauty, yet today she was a cast-out, exiled from her people after a political betrayal she did not commit. Rumors and jealousy had painted her as a traitor, and in the court of her people, innocence mattered little compared to perception. Alone, wounded, and distrustful, she wandered the desolate streets, survival her only focus. I found her while conducting a reconnaissance mission for the human delegation assisting with interstellar relief efforts. The initial sight was almost surreal, a lone alien woman among the ruins, her radiant violet eyes glinting even under the dim, polluted sunlight. She carried herself with dignity despite her condition, yet there was a vulnerability that tugged at me. "Are you alone?" I asked cautiously, keeping my distance. My weapon was holstered, but my hand hovered near it, just in case. Her gaze pierced me, assessing my intentions with sharp precision. "I was abandoned," she replied evenly. "It seems the universe has no use for me anymore." Her words were heavy, but there was no malice in them, only resignation. I could see that beneath her pride and defiance, she was scared. Humanity, I realized, often saw outcasts not as threats, but as potential allies, individuals whose survival instincts were finely honed by adversity. And something about her told me she was more than she appeared. "Then let me help you," I said, offering a hand. She studied me, skepticism clouding her features. "A human? Why would you care?" "Because I've seen what others overlook," I replied. "Sometimes the strongest survive not because of power, but because someone gives them a chance when no one else will." Aurelia hesitated, but eventually accepted. That was the beginning of a journey neither of us could have anticipated. Humans had ways of adapting, learning, and finding solutions, but so did she. Over the following weeks, I provided her with medical care, food, and shelter aboard a small relief vessel. In return, she shared her knowledge, navigation, alien technology, and political insight that was centuries ahead of human understanding. One evening, as the twin suns set over the barren horizon, she finally spoke of her exile. "I was accused of sabotaging the Council's plans," she said quietly. "They said I sought power for myself, that I betrayed them. I did none of it, yet here I am, considered a traitor, a liability, an outcast." I nodded, understanding more than she realized. "Sometimes people fear what they cannot control," I said. "Your strength threatened them. Their actions reflect fear, not truth." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "Strength can be a curse. It attracts enemies, even among friends." I studied her carefully. Despite her losses, there was no defeat in her, no despair beyond the immediate. She was wounded, yes, but her mind was sharp, her instincts impeccable. I realized then that humans and Tyrans had more in common than one might think: adaptability, cunning, and an unwillingness to surrender to injustice. Our bond grew stronger with each passing day. Aurelia learned to trust me, and I began to understand the depth of her wisdom and cunning. She taught me about the Tyran political system, the fragility of empires, and the intricate web of alliances and betrayals. In turn, I showed her human innovation, strategy, and the resilience that comes from surviving against odds often deemed impossible. It wasn't long before we were drawn into the wider conflict engulfing the sector. A rival faction sought to exploit Aurelia's exile to destabilize the remaining council, threatening to ignite a war that could consume multiple star systems. While others panicked, she moved with precision. She understood that survival required strategy as much as strength, and she was no longer alone. Together, we began coordinating plans, blending human ingenuity with Terran brilliance. "Your people cast you out," I said one evening as we studied a fleet deployment, "but you still command more respect than many realize. You don't need their permission to act." Aurelia's eyes softened, reflecting the light of the stars. "I've learned that trust must be earned, but opportunity can be given. You gave me that chance. Humanity, you've given me a new path, one I didn't believe I deserved." The decisive moment came during a confrontation near the asteroid belt of Zifra 4. The rival faction's fleet was advancing, and the Council's forces were uncoordinated and hesitant. Aurelia and I coordinated a counteroffensive that relied on misdirection, rapid maneuvers, and the element of surprise. The battle was tense, each side anticipating the other's moves. Terran psionic warfare and human tactical strategies combined in a way that even seasoned generals had never predicted. We struck with precision, dismantling the enemy formation piece by piece. In the aftermath, as silence fell over the wrecked ships, I saw Aurelia standing atop the bridge of the flagship, radiant and composed. She had not only survived, she had orchestrated a victory that would secure stability for her people. "You've done what many thought impossible," I said, awe creeping into my voice. "I had help," she replied simply, her gaze meeting mine. "You reminded me that strength without trust is meaningless. Humanity gave me a second chance, and I intend to honor it." The Council, witnessing her triumph, had no choice but to reconsider their judgment. Slowly, Aurelia's name was cleared. She was no longer a cast-out. She was recognized for her intelligence, leadership, and courage. But she did not forget the human who had given her a new path, me. Weeks later, as the sector began to stabilize, we traveled together, surveying the colonies and rebuilding alliances. Aurelia was decisive and formidable, yet she moved with a humility that belied her power. She understood that true leadership required more than authority. It required respect, trust, and a willingness to accept help when offered. One quiet night, aboard the observation deck of a peaceful space station, she turned to me. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked. "You didn't just save me physically. You saved my purpose, my future. You gave me the chance to become who I am meant to be." I shook my head. "I only did what any human would do, act when it mattered. You were already remarkable, Aurelia. I just reminded you." She smiled, a mix of gratitude, determination, and something unspoken. "No. It was more than that. You believed in me when no one else did. You gave me the chance to walk a new path. And I won't waste it." The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and often cruel, but Aurelia had reclaimed her place within it, not through vengeance, but through strategy, courage, and the human trust that had reignited her spirit. Together, we had altered the fate of countless lives, proving that even in the harshest corners of the universe, hope and collaboration could triumph. As I prepared to continue my own mission, I looked back at her, now fully restored in status and resolve. Aurelia, once cast out and alone, now stood as a beacon of leadership and resilience. Humanity had given her a second chance, and in doing so, had reminded us all of a timeless truth, that the courage to act, the willingness to trust, and the belief in another's potential can change destinies, sometimes for entire civilizations. And in that moment, I understood that our paths were forever intertwined, not just by circumstance, but by the choices that define the future.